The excitement of knowing how to play chess. We want to make you play more chess games. As a beginner, there are 10 tips you pick from this video that would enable you get better in your chess game. Tip number 1, develop pieces and attack towards the center. In this opening, e4, e5, knight to f3, attacking the pawn in the center. Black defends with knight to c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, c3. This is standard way to develop your pieces towards the center. These pawns are towards the center for white and for black. The knights are well placed towards the center, well developed. Same thing with the black knight and the black bishop. If you choose to play with d4, your opponent might respond with d5, bishop to f4, and so you can see these moves are towards the center, and which gives you balance in your gameplay. Tip number 2, castle before attacking. In this example, e4, e5, white was in a hurry to attack, so he played these moves so fast. After this set of moves in the opening, d4 comes up. White throws a pawn, trying to play the gambit style. As a beginner, you might fall into some cheap traps with black right responses. So in this position, let's say black takes, white goes for an aggressive attack e5, ignoring the fact that the king is still in the center and the king needs to be safe before any attack is carried on. Here, black goes for knight to e4, queen takes on d4, d5 follows. After knight to c3, bishop to c5 comes up. With tempo, black has developed his pieces and is now attacking the white queen with the intention to pick up this particular pawn on f2. In this position, if queen takes the pawn on d5, trying to go for an escape, there is an intermediate bishop takes the pawn check. You see, because of this king is in the center, it was easy for black to have this combination. King goes up to e2, knight takes knight with check, pawn takes queen. Another example includes knight f6, knight to c3, then d6. After bishop to c4, knight takes on e4. In this position also, you notice that the black king is still in the center. Black goes for an early attack. At least at this point in the game, you should consider keeping the king away from the center and going for development. Taking the pawn in the center was a form of an attack, so that if knight takes, he can push this, having an initiative to have a fork attack. However, white goes for a different concept by taking the pawn on f7 with check. This takes a pawn on f7 and lures the king to take the bishop, which takes away the castling right from the king. Knight takes the knight on e4, e5, queen to f3 check, king to g8, knight to g5. After queen to f6, queen to b3 check. This is how white lost this game due to this simple concept. This is tip number 3. In this example, after e4, knight f3 attacking that pawn, e5, an aggressive attack on the knight. If knight goes to d5, knight to f3, d6, countering this pawn in the center. Bishop to c4, which is logical, going after this knight. Black makes an inferior move, bishop to e6. In this modern dispensation, after knowing this information, this move actually prevents the development of this particular pawn and delays the development of this dark squared bishop. We are focusing on kingside pawn. How does this concern kingside pawn? In this position, white went on to play knight to c3. I can seize the opportunity to play knight takes knight. After pawn takes, I gain a bishop. This still keep my pawn structure around the king side. However, let's look at something that went wrong. In this position, knight to b6 was played. This allowed white to play bishop takes bishop, pawn takes, removing one of the sole defender of the king as early as move 6. This is affecting your pawn structure around the king, and if you castle, you only have 2 pawns left to hold and defend the king. Well, this game continued after knight to g5, attacking the weakness. a6 followed again, pushing another pawn. Knight takes the pawn on e6, attacking the queen. Queen goes to d7. Here, queen comes in, pawn to g6. Queen takes the pawn on g6, checkmate. Another example would be when each players have castled. Now take a look at this opening, moving the pieces at random. The first move you made is logical, which is attacking this bishop with the move h6. Naturally, you are trying to scare that bishop away and reduce attacker on your king side, at the same time trying to stop or prevent this pin from staying longer on the board. If bishop goes to h4, g5 is an overextension in this position. These are your king side pawn, and you need to find a way to maintain this structure at least for a longer period of time by leaving these pawns this way. With this format, you enable your opponent crack his or her brain to find a way to break down your defense. But playing this aggressive without proper calculation might enable your opponent play something and you might lose the game earlier. Tip number 4. Do not take out the queen too early, or do not take the queen out too early. This information is straightforward. In this opening, after e4, e5, bishop to c4, knight to c6, white goes for the early attack to make the 4-move checkmate. However, because of the stage in which white is playing in and his level of understanding, after black defended with knight to f6, blocking the relationship between the queen and this f7 pawn, white goes for d3. Here, black throws in an early attack with knight to d4. White lacks the adequate reply. He should have brought down the queen back home to d1. However, he chooses to stay on e3. This enables black to play knight takes the pawn on c2 with check. So after the king moves, the knight takes the queen. This is winning material as early as move 6 for black. This is another opening which features the center counter gambit, or the Scandinavian. After pawn takes, queen takes, the queen is out from her den very early. In this position, knight to c3 comes up, attacking the queen with tempo. White is developing. However, black must respond to this. Black lacks the ability to find the right response, then plays an inferior move, queen to c6, which gave the game away after bishop moves to b5 to pin the queen to the king. These are examples of what might go wrong if you bring your queen too early as a beginner. This is tip number 5. Let's look at why professional players or experienced players go for the Sicilian. This is the reason because it enables them trade side pawns for center pawns. Take for example, after the first move number 1, e4, c5. If white goes for an immediate d4, black goes ahead to take that pawn instantly. This enables you fight for the center very early and give you breathing space along this d file. In this case, you can also develop your pieces towards the center and be rest assured that you can see line of actions. In the second example, which is the French, after this set of moves, white has locked the center. It is nice to know that you can still throw in c5 in this position. In this case, after knight to f3, you can just simply take that pawn on d4, 9 takes. You will notice that your bishop has breathing space over this diagonal to come out into the game. The knight can come into the game via d7 or even c6 and so on. Then practically white now have only one pawn in the center. So it is nice to remember to trade side pawns for the center pawns. This is tip number 6. Avoid doubling your pawns. In this position, there is a popular continuation with knight to c3. This can come up, then bishop to b5. In this position, it is very important to know that a weak type of pawn structure is a doubled pawn stacked up together, because you spend time developing the both of them step by step. Let me quickly show you. If black goes for knight to f6 in this position, then it is white choice to play bishop takes knight. If pawn takes, you have a doubled pawn. This is an example of a doubled pawn, a weak pawn structure. This is actually a weakness for black. In the future, it might be a good compensation. However, for now, for you to develop this pawn at the back on c7, you have to develop this pawn on c6, and that will delay your development, and your opponent might capitalize on this as a weakness. Instead of allowing white to take that knight, you can still prevent doubled pawn structure by pushing the bishop here. In most cases, most people like playing the knight to this square and fianchetto the bishop in the future. That's an idea. So try to prevent doubled pawn structure. This is tip number 7. Connect rooks and use open file. I have to bring this game as an example. This is a game played in 1952 by Mikhail Tal, who played the white pieces against Theodor Zit, who defended with the black pieces. In this position, the rooks are almost connected. Mikhail Tal played queen to d2 after knight to b6, queen to d2, connecting the two rooks. The two rooks are well connected, and the files they are on are semi-open files. At this point, we still have pawns on those files, so the files are not fully open file. These files still contain this pawn and this pawn, obstructing the movement of these rooks, this and this. Same with this. We still have pawns here. However, this is semi-open for this rook, but this is closed for this rook because the rook has no entry space on this file. In this game, how did this game continue? Knight takes on a4, f5 followed, trying to create more room for this rook to have mobility on this f file. Pawn takes on f5, knight to f6, sacrifice comes up. In this position, Mikhail Tal sacrificed the knight. However, black did not take it. He played king to h8. Rook takes the pawn on f5, activating one rook and putting the rook on this semi-open file. Rook to f8, rook on a to f1. Mikhail Tal gladly connects the two rooks. See how he uses his rook following this particular tip. Bishop to c8, attacking the rook, rook to h5. After queen to f8, rook to f4. Knight takes on c3, rook on f to h4, going for the attack and trying to demolish the kingside defense. Black took the bishop on e2, king to f2. g5 comes up, rook takes on h6 check, queen takes on h6, rook takes on h6 check. After king to j7, queen came into the game, king to f8, rook to h8 check. This example is enough for you to understand mobility of your rooks connecting your rooks and placing your rooks on open file. This is tip number 8. Improve your pieces. This game was played between Robert Ban against the former world chess champion Robert James Fischer in 1963. In this position, Fischer played the black pieces. How did he improve his pieces? Fischer wanted to make a checkmate and wanted to arrive in a conclusion in this game. So, he first played bishop to b7 check, bringing this bishop into the game. King to f1. Here he played queen to d7, aiming for this particular location with check. White moved, he played queen to h3 check. After king to g1, keeping the king safe, he furthermore went for improving other pieces that need to be in the game. He brought in the rook down with rook to e1 check. This is the intention in this position. If queen had taken that rook right away, then queen comes into the square, makes checkmate. So in this position, white actually went for something else with rook takes rook on e1. Here he came in with bishop takes the knight on d4. After queen takes the bishop, queen to g2 is checkmate. This is another example connected to improve your pieces. In this position, after white plays f3, what do you think you can play here? Looking at this rook in this angle of this chessboard, the rook is not really doing much, and this rook is not participating much in the game. We can say by position, these two rooks are not active in this game. So, this game was actually played between Botvinnik and Petrosian in 1963. Petrosian with the black pieces made a simple developing move, improving the rook from this angle to c8. This is logical because we now put the rook on a very active file. This is very open file. In fact, there's no pawns on this particular file. This rook is happy here. In few moves in the future, it is possible to plan on this pin against the queen by bringing the bishop into the game, and many other things can happen. Or even a simple move like this later on in the game to attack the knight. In this example, we're talking about bishop are better in open positions and knights are better in closed positions. This position, knight just take the pawn on c6. Queen took, there is a move, e5. This is a typical example of active bishops. For white, the dark square bishop is very free, occupying this diagonal, very open. Now, after this move, we have a discover attack from this particular bishop through this diagonal. You can say at the moment that these two bishops are much active and happy in these open diagonals compared to this bishop here and this one acting in defensive role. This is an example of a closed position. The knights are happy in closed position. The bishop on b7 is having lesser lines of action along the diagonal. Therefore, we can simply say this is a bad bishop and this is a good knight. Men looking at this position, beginners may not really know how to continue from here. The best way to continue from here is to sacrifice this knight by taking that pawn so that we can have a clearance and this pawn can promote after this series of moves. This is how you can use your knight when you have this kind of close position against a bad bishop. Tip number 10. Activate your king in the endgame. This might be a simple winning endgame for white. However, if you start pushing pawns as quick as possible towards the end of the board, It is possible this king can catch this pawn and you might end up losing this game without bringing in the king to support in this kind of endgame. So a very good understanding of this kind of endgame is to activate the king by pushing the king to e3. If king to c6, king to e4, if king to d6, king to f5. By doing this, you can as well create room for the king to enter into the game through these diagonals, support this pawn, and become a queen. That is one tactical idea in the end game. And also, it is possible to leave the pawn for the black player to pursue, then pick up other pawns. That is a very good use of the king in the end game. Thank you for watching this video. I wish you good luck in your chess games. Do not forget, if this video has been helpful to you, subscribe to this channel for more, like this video and share to your friends. See you in more videos on this channel.